Hi, I'm Gareth Rose from iPitch.com.au. This interview is with Matt Cameron. Matt is a New Zealand/Australian entrepreneur who's gone over to Silicon Valley to set up his new venture, Corporate Catapult. In this interview, I chat with Matt all about starting up in the US, how to register a company over there, how to get visas, what sort of events and networks are going on there in the Valley, and what resources are available, and what sort of benefits, what are the positives and the negatives of moving over to the US. So if you're an Australian entrepreneur and you're thinking about either going over to visit the scene over there in the Valley, or thinking about starting up or moving your business over there, check out this interview. Well, thanks for sitting down with me, Matt.
Good to be here.
Cheers. So, look, obviously I brought you in because I want to hear a lot more about you starting up in the US. There's a lot of guys here in Australia that are very interested in starting up business in the US. Basically, there's two scenarios. I mean, either initially they move over to the US before they start up, and then basically get set up there, or they've already got a start up here in Australia and they want to expand over to the US, and maybe they set up a sales office or they move their whole business over there. So they're the type of people that be interested in this. Obviously, you decided it'd be worthwhile setting up in the US for Corporate Catapult. Mm-hmm. What are the benefits that you see?
There are a bunch. I think the primary reason we went to the States was because we have a vision that we're a global company that will be eventually acquired by a US entity. And my initial thinking was that we want to build relationships with the sort of organisations that need to get to know us over there. So in my context, these are people like your Salesforce.coms, your LinkedIns, and other professional networking type organisations, and they're all based over there. The second thing is that we want to build relationships with the sorts of people that we want to be financed by. So getting over there and building, as Mark Suster would say, data points, so that you're not just rocking up on the last day when you require funding and saying, hey, I need a check. It's about building credibility with these people over time, which perhaps we can talk more about later. And thirdly, being in the ecosystem that is Silicon Valley and San Francisco. So putting your finger on the pulse and understanding what's going on today were really the main motivators for getting over there. A bunch of commercial reasons for getting over there as well. Yeah. But outside of those, it really is about being part of that environment and building the relationships with the right sort of people. And depending on your business, there'll be a different context for each.
So, tell me more about that environment. I mean, what is it like over there when you go over the Valley and you set up and there's events on and all the stuff? What goes on there?
Well, before I talk about that exactly, I might say that if you haven't done this yourself before, i.e. moved to a new country and had to drop anchor and make new friends, join new organisations, and get connected to the community, that's a task in and of itself. So I don't think people should take that lightly. And I would say if someone's thinking about doing that, they should do a reconnaissance mission. And if you've got a co-founder, you should go over with them, and both of you scope it out. And the first thing you need to decide is who's going there. One of you going there and you're going to leave the base back here, or both of you going across. And if you're going by yourself, you've really got to be that outgoing, gregarious, natural networker to get the value from it. Because in any new environment, whether you go with a company or alone like this, it's challenging. It's a lonely place to be unless you have the inclination to get out there and get connected. So that's the first kind of word of warning or advice I would say, is make sure you're the type of person that can succeed in that environment. It's like turning up to a dance. If you're not going to go and talk to anyone, you're not going to have a good night. So that's probably the first thing. In terms of the environment, what's it like? It is literally what's the word? There's a cacophony of noise, and you've got to filter that out and figure out how best to spend your time. Every day of the week, you can go to a networking event. Every morning, you can probably go to a breakfast meeting, and you've only got so many hours in the day. And one of the venture capitalists says, don't become a conference junkie. You can go to those once a week as well. So first thing you need to do is go out and scope it, and you can pretty much do that from here in terms of the digests that are available that tell you about all the events, and you can kind of filter it down and figure out what you need to sample or taste test. Yeah. When you get there, my advice would be to go to one of everything, figure out what's going to work for you, I'm happy to talk about the ones that are, if appropriate now, we can talk about the types of events on meetups that I think are really worthwhile. But suffice it to say, you should very quickly figure out what's relevant to you, and then allocate time, dedicate to it. The way I use my calendar is that I segment my days and say this amount of time each day is spent on X activity, and part of that's networking and relationship building, and then it's a matter of just slotting in the right events, and there'll always be something available for you. And then following up on those events, because I looked at my contact database the other day, and in the almost 12 months I've been there, I've got 133 people that I've met that I've allocated as helpful and useful to our business, and they're people that I want to maintain a relationship with. Because meeting them once at a breakfast doesn't mean I'm going to get value from the relationship, so maintaining those relationships. Again, filtering back to what's useful and cutting the noise out.
Okay, this can go a number of ways here, but while my mind's on it, this obviously your background's in sales and relationship building. I'm interested actually to hear, say you do meet someone at a networking event like that, how would you, it depends on what you're trying to do with it, but broadly speaking, how would you maybe follow that up? Is it you maybe email them and then try and set up just a one-on-one meeting ongoing, like after that, or? Yeah,
it depends, and I think it's the same in any sales situation, because really selling is just relationship development. And at the end of the day, the way I look at it is relationships are a two-way thing. There's got to be mutual value in it. Right? Because the way the Valley works is everyone's very, very open. So everyone wants to help everyone else. That everyone there, I think more so than here in New Zealand, they've figured out that the way to
or in Australia.
Here or inside my terrible accent, here or in New Zealand.
Okay, cool.
We have yet to figure out that the fastest way to get to the top is to be stepping on each other's shoulders and helping each other up the mountain. They've really got that sorted out over there. So if you meet somebody and they have advice for you, they'll give it to you on the spot. If you need to follow up with them, the thing you really need to think about is, what am I going to bring him or her next time? So my formula for doing this is we meet, you're an expert in ABC, or you have an introduction at some point I know I'm going to need. All I'm thinking about is how I can help you. So the first thing I do is send a follow-up note after the meeting and say, hey, it was great to meet you. I enjoyed talking about A, B, and C. I'm going to think some more about this thing we talked about and see if I can help you with it. And that just gives me some time to actually genuinely do some research or think about how I might be able to assist them. And I make a deposit in their emotional bank account that I can draw down on later. And that's the key thing. Some interesting research out recently that showed that when I do something for you, I still place a lot of value on what I did for you a few months later, but you don't. Which means that once I do something for you, I need to ask for the favour back soon before it devalues in your mind.
Yeah.
So that's the key to relationship building, is momentum. You need to and fro fairly frequently. So that's my formula. Meet, follow up email, think about how I can help them, send them a note, an article, physically do something, make an introduction before I then come back and look to draw back on that favour. And that seems to be working really well for me. What doesn't work well at all is if you follow up straight away and ask for something, when we just don't have the emotional, the capital between us for me to draw down on.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thanks for that. So, just tracking back a little bit to initially the benefits of moving over there, you alluded to some other commercial benefits that we didn't go into too much detail about. Yeah. Expand more on that.
So it's a case-by-case basis, but for us, and I think this will be fairly broadly applicable, if you're looking for an exit at some point in the US, it's much simpler for that transaction if you are based there already. There's a whole bunch of capital gains and income tax issues if you're a non-resident US company. So most people know that people incorporate in Delaware, the reason being that there's no income tax if the business is operating outside of the state of Delaware, and we today are operating in California, so that's good. Venture capitalists all prefer what they call C Corps, incorporated in Delaware because it simplifies things. I'm not the guy to talk about that in detail. I'll just say that it's a generally accepted practice and people should consider that. So we did that because we believe our future is to be acquired by a company that's going to augment their services with our product at some point. So several years down the track, that's our vision. So we need to make that as frictionless as possible. And for a lot of people, that's going to be the right thing to do. Secondly, I would say that for many businesses, depending on what they're into, certainly in the biotech space or anywhere where there's a lot of R&D, depending on which state you incorporate in, there are a lot of tax incentives over there that we can't take advantage of here. So that's simple. Other than that, I don't think that there are a lot of government incentives in the States that make it a huge or outweigh being here. It's more about what your future plans are for exit. The non-commercial side of that is that the thing I talked to before in terms of the ecosystem, but also access to expertise. I've got a flip side to that, which you can talk about in a minute, but you've got people over there that have done it before several times, people that have had several successful exits and whatnot, and if you can get them as advisors, then I think that's really beneficial and helpful. We have some great people in Australia, but everyone wants access to them, and there are far fewer of those people here than there are in the States.
Okay, great. And in terms of your own business, obviously the US is a much larger market as well. Does that sort of weigh into it in terms of actually the end customers? I mean, I guess it's more users in your case, but in customers / users, it's a larger market, or like how does that play?
For me, no, because we're a B2C model, and we're a software as a service or website, so we can launch anywhere, as it were. I would say, however, coming from a B2B background, that in the States you can make more mistakes because you've got such a large market that you only need a very, very small fraction of that to be viable. Whereas in Australia, and I'll keep referring to my friends in New Zealand because I'm a Kiwi and I want them to be part of this conversation, you've kind of got to get 80 or 90% right because you can only burn so many customers in a B2B environment. So it's very forgiving from that standpoint. And obviously, you can scale much faster over there. If I make a sale inside a Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and then I do very well and go enterprise-wide, that's a very different proposition from me making a sale and going enterprise at Bank of America. So, obvious scale there.
Yeah, great. What about or are there any downsides then of going to the US?
Right now, one of the downsides, if you go to the West Coast, is the access to talent. They're describing it, some people are saying bubble, some are saying frothy, but right now there's a lot of angel money out there, which means that there are a ton of people jumping into startups, and there are some very high salaries being paid. There are some very interesting equity arrangements being made, and then of course you've got the obvious talent vacuums like Zynga, Groupon, Facebook, all the cool companies that all the smart kids want to go and work for. So right now, startups like ours going to the States are really having difficulty attracting top engineering talent because in the old days you could offer them lots of equity and small salaries and they're fine, but today they're getting the best of both worlds. They're getting $150,000, $180,000 salaries for a senior developer and significant options to go with it. So you can't really compete with that. So I would say that's a downside to being in the States if you intended for your entire team to be there, which we've not done. That's one of the primary reasons that we've left our development team in Sydney, because we think we've got world-class talent available to us in Australia, and you can get access to those people because they're in such a bubble here.
Let's actually talk about that more, because we were chatting about it before the interview. Obviously, are you the only one, by the way, over there in your... Okay, so communication-wise, you got your co-founder and you got your development team back here in Australia. What's the dynamic there? How does that work, and what sort of challenges have you faced with the communication and such? One person or one or few, being over there and some over here.
So it's been driven home to me that this really is. It is like a marriage to the extent that we're committed to each other in this venture. We're going to have good days and bad days, and we have to make it work. And my experience has been a very good one because my co-founder is someone I've worked with for the last 6 years. He's a friend and somebody I've worked with professionally, so we've been through difficult times in a professional environment, and we both know how we react under times of stress. So we had that history. I would say that one thing we learned was, even though we're very, very close friends, you have to speak almost every day, and we did that via Skype. And what we found was that when we didn't do that, then doubts creep in, uncertainties, miscommunications. I thought that you said, but she said, stuff starts to happen. And when you're working in different time zones also, it can be challenging because at times I'm effectively 5 hours ahead or 19 hours behind. And so, it'll be 10 o'clock my time and he wants to speak with me. And that's fine, but if I decide to turn off at 9, his perception might be, gee, that guy's not really, he's pulling the pin a bit early. maybe he doesn't think like that, but there's always that type of dynamic going on. So I would say that if people are looking to split the team in the way we have, you have to have a very, very strong personal relationship, and also you must have seen each other under stress before, because if it's just a friendship that's now becoming professional, you run the risk of surprising each other with the way you react to different circumstances. So a couple of things: great mates, and also talk every day if you can.
Okay, great. And the other thing, not to cover old ground, but we did discuss is you do make regular trips, I think you said back here, to have face-to-face contact as well. So tell me about that. Yeah,
so my formula for that is that I come back every 6 weeks, and my co-founder, his name's Steve Bukeisen, we intended that we would rotate it, so maximum 6 week stretch. So in an ideal world, it'd be every 4 weeks he'd come up there, and 4 weeks I'd come back. I'm a little selfish in that I have children in this part of the world, so I come back more than he goes up there. So I think that works. I think 6 weeks is about the limit, where you just need to sit down, have a beer together, talk about how things are going, and actually get some time together where it's not just professional. Because as you can imagine, when you're Skyping, there's very little time for small talk and social chit-chat. It's really just, what are we doing today, yada yada. And if you're going to keep a relationship together, you've got to have downtime together. So just in any office environment, you have Friday night drinks or whatever you do, you need that in this environment as well.
Yeah, cool. Good advice. So let's get back to some specifics about the actual events over in the Valley, because you mentioned that before.
Yeah.
What are some of the better ones? I mean, let's just say someone is wanting to go over and do a recon trip, or they're over there now, or whatever the case is. What are some of the good ones?
So I wrote down a couple of things. I think the first thing, as I said before, is you've got to do a bit of an online recce to figure out what's available to you. And the resources I use, I made a note of. So the first one I would suggest is they have a bit of a scout on meetup.com.
Okay.
I found it to be really useful, with the interest topics and whatever, because most events... Even conferences now are listing the events on there. I would also suggest people find people or influential folks that they respect, like your Dave McClure's or whatever, and follow them on plancast.com to see what they're going to. So that gives you a flavour. I would also subscribe to Startup Digest, SF New Tech, and they're telling you weekly what the events are, and then head out to them. Then specifically the events that I've got value from that I think are generic. I've gone to lots of conferences, which are going to be interesting to me but no one else, are Bootstrappers Breakfast. So run by a guy called Sean Murphy. There are 3 different locations in the Valley in San Francisco. They're run on Wednesday mornings and Friday mornings. I think there's 3 or 4 a month. $5 a session, and basically it's a group of bootstrapping entrepreneurs get together. It's facilitated, and you talk about your challenges and you try and help each other solve problems. For me, I haven't actually had as much value about problem solving at those sessions, but what I have done is met some really interesting people that can be helpful. So I've had several referrals come through that networking thing. So that's great. Bootstrappers Breakfast. The second one I would say is Entrepreneur Commons, a guy called Mark Dangeard. He's a French-American, set this up some years ago. He's got chapters all around the world now, actually. I think he's looking at getting one here in Sydney as well. And that's a similar format, again, facilitated meetup once a month. And that's been a great network. And you turn up there with one problem, one success to share with the group. And then in a mutually confidential environment, you get to talk with other entrepreneurs. So I think that's been great. And that's really helpful. Even if you don't have anything specific to talk about, you can hear what's going on. Again, the networking's fantastic. The other event, if you're a technical person, I think it's only annual now, is Code Camp. In Code Camp, I attended last year. There were 1,800 people that turned up to this thing. Yeah. It's a really serious event. It's in the Valley, and there are multiple streams at a university campus on all the stuff you're going to want to talk about in terms of the latest developments in technology for coders, with a startup focus. Some really good speakers, some great panelists, and it was virtually free, as I understand it. It's a not-for-profit thing, so that's great. So that's something to start you with. In terms of the network meetups that I particularly like, the SF New Tech are about every fortnight, every 2 weeks. And BizTech Day are 2 that are really well patronised by people on a regular basis. Then groups that have other get-togethers, the Founders Institute, run by Ade Alessi, They have some great events to go along to. And it'd be great to time your reconnaissance trip to see one of those pitch nights, and Founders Institute have them. Top of my head, I can't think of any others straight away, but they're out there. So if you look for pitch nights, they're really valuable because you can hear other entrepreneurs talking about their business, listen to the feedback that's coming from the venture capitalists and angels, and just get a feel for what's going on.
Cool. So actually, in terms of that, of angels or VCs, do they come to all these sort of events, or my feeling, at least here in Australia, is that certainly some events, these guys sort of come along to them, but there's a lot of sort of events where it's more just the entrepreneurs or guys starting up. Is it the same in the US? Like, does the money mingle, I guess, with the entrepreneurs, or do they still sort of keep it a little bit separate?
Pretty much separate. The reason being that if they turned up to these events, they'd get inundated with approaches. But you know the ones they're going to be at. For example, the Founders Institute, they have Founders Day. You've got panels of VCs and their associates turn up as well, so they're good days to go to. The way to get close to VC, or one of the many ways to do it, is to turn up to specific panel nights. So, for example, there's a Udemy, UDEMY. They run these education nights, seminars, and they'll have someone like a Dave McClure turn up and talk about a topic. And so, you get limited access through those sorts of things. One of the things that's really surprised me about the Valley is that here we usually give people a respectful distance. If you're somebody senior or respected, we won't just approach you. In San Francisco, they'll swarm you. It amazes me that a Mark Suster or a Dave McClure or any of these guys, as soon as they step off the stage, they're swarmed people. It blows my mind. It's a cultural difference that I had to get used to. But I think where we can kind of cut through that is that if we're thoughtful about our approaches and do it in a targeted way, you can cut through the general noise that they're surrounded by.
Yeah, okay, great. And what about angels? Are there sort of angel groups over there, or is it the same sort of thing? You're on panels and it's the same scenario, or are they
angel groups are actually easy to get to. So you've got your band of angels, your Keiretsu Forum, you've got Silicon Valley Angels, and all very organised, very experienced. Band of Angels is a good example that all have run tech companies before, very successful exits. All of them is a precondition to being there. They have their meetings, I think, once a month, which is like most angel groups. You just submit your application, and so Band of Angels, I know I was recently with Ian, the managing director and founder, he says they get about 60 applications a month now, and I think they're watching, I may be wrong, but about 3 or 5 on a night actually pitch after they're filtered down. So for me, I think presenting it at an angel forum like that is really, and I might get slaughtered for this, but I think it's a little bit a rookie's game, because if you're pitching to a band like that, you're basically trying to pitch to individual angels in a group, because they don't invest as a group most of the time. Yeah. 5 or 6 of them say, yeah, I'm in, and they'll invest with you. For me, I feel like it's a very inefficient way to get access to these people. And personally, I want to pick and choose who I'm working with. So I don't want to. I don't think people are well served in a forum like that where they will have 5 guys saying I'm in, and they want to do it together. Of course, you can say no, but there's some pressure to accept them as a group. I think the sign of a very, very good entrepreneur is somebody who can shoot with a rifle, not a shotgun, and look for people that can add value to what they're doing, and also where they're their business is a natural fit to that person's portfolio. So, for example, in my scenario, I'm talking to people that I really respect, that I think can add value to what we're doing, have the ability to help us with follow-on capital in the next stage of funding, and who can augment our brand by being associated with us. But the number one thing is people that you really want to work with, because when time gets tough, you want your finance partner to be in the trenches with you. And I don't know that groups of angels fit that bill necessarily.
Yeah, okay. Interesting spin on that. So another question though related to angels. In terms of being a Australian business over here, say if you are based in Australia, what's your, maybe you don't have much exposure to it, but what's your take on the likelihood of US angels or based in the US, but investing in Australian companies where it is the Australian companies based in Australia?
Yeah, I've had several conversations with angels about this, and my understanding is that it's a very limited possibility for you to get that. There are very few angels that would invest outside of their state, let alone outside of the country. Angels, by virtue of the definition, really, are people that are experienced entrepreneurs, in most cases, certainly professional angels are, that want to add value to your company. It's very hard to do that when you're not in the same country. They want to have a feeling of, not control, but contribution, and that's their biggest value, I think. So you just can't do that remotely. And it's even true to a certain extent with venture capital firms. Unless you're fairly late stage, you're not going to get a VC from the US investing in you here. The limited partners don't understand that. They wouldn't want to do it. So you look at a firm like GRP, one of the biggest ones based in LA, they'll certainly invest outside their state. But if you look at the individuals that work there in terms of their angel investing, it's a very rare event that they do it outside of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So Aussies are really pushing it uphill to do that. So having said that, if you've built the business here with Australian angels and you've got your Series A and whatever else, and then you get an early exit, there's nothing precluding you being bought by a US company. And a good example of that would be Salesforce.com, who is of late have been quite acquisitive. They've bought several European companies. There's no barrier to that. But that's, in relative startup terms, it's relatively mature by the time you're going to get acquired by someone like that.
Yeah, okay, great. In terms of actual, you've gone into a lot of detail about the events over there, which has been great. But in terms of actually maybe like Australian networks sort of over there, so say you're an Aussie entrepreneur, you go over there, in theory it would be nice to go over there and sort of get picked up by other Australian entrepreneurs who are already over there doing stuff.
Yep.
What sort of networks are there over there that are, I guess, focused or specifically assist other Australian entrepreneurs?
So maybe I haven't given it the right focus because my company is US incorporated, and therefore, I'm, in theory, we're an American company. But Anzatech are active over there, and their focus, of course, is helping Australian companies build businesses that will send revenue back here and jobs for Australia. So, but I've not spent a lot of time because I don't experience them. In terms of the less formal stuff, there's if you go to meetup.com, there are South African, Aussie, Kiwi networking groups that tend to come together. There are a few alumni networks over there. Again, I haven't been part of because I'm not. I didn't get educated here. The Kiwi Expats Association is an example of one that I do a lot with, and they're very helpful. And I think it really comes down to tapping into individuals, because my experience anyway has been that you'll meet a couple of Aussies or Kiwis that have been there for a number of years and they just want to help you out. So my circle in that group is really probably 15 or 20 people, but it's not a monthly thing I go to where 50 to 100 of us turn up. It's just not like that in my experience. But there are some great entrepreneurs that are there that can really help. Andrew Lacey, who sold Tapulous to Disney last year, fabulous exit, great mentor, and somebody who I met when I was first there. There's guys like that can just give you that little tap in the right direction, I think can be helpful. I have found that every Aussie and Kiwi I've met there have wanted to help, and I do the same, but I don't see the regular networking things going on right now.
Okay. No, that's great anyway. Look, obviously, you're not a lawyer, but you've sort of, the experience here that we're talking about is your own, going over there and incorporating Corporate Catapult over in the US. Can you expand on that a little bit more? So just to clarify, if you go over and you want to incorporate in the US, you do it in Delaware for tax reasons, particularly if you're operating outside of Delaware.
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay. What about getting visas and such like that?
Yeah, so first thing I'll say then, a precursor to all of this, if you're going to go to the States, you need to get the best lawyer you can find and spend the money. Okay. So I was exceptionally fortunate in that I was introduced to a guy called Ted Wang, who's a partner at Fenwick and West. There's a couple of big names in the Valley. They're one, there's Sansini and a whole bunch that I'll not remember. But I think you want a brand name for two reasons. Number one, it's just a tick in the box when you're looking for funding. They are you with Fenwick's? Oh, okay, good. That means they know that all your documentation is going to be in order because they do that well. Secondly, they've got an incredible network. So I'll mention Ted again just because, number one, he hooked me up with an immigration lawyer that made things smooth, which I'll tell you about the specific process in a moment. And secondly, introduced me to my first round of funders, who are the people that invested in the biggest, I won't say for confidentiality reasons, but the brand names that you and I would know, and you go, because of the social proof provided by him being my lawyer. I had a choice. I had a lawyer who was a great guy, really offered me incubation space for free, all sorts of things in the Valley, or this guy. And I went with Ted because of the reason I've just stated.
Yeah, okay.
So how did I do it? We had Fenwick's incorporate for us, so we had an entity over there, and that was inexpensive. By the way, the process for setting up, getting incorporated, and getting myself a visa, which I'll tell you about in a moment, cost less than 10 grand. Okay. Rough budget for you. Should be able to do it for less than 10 grand.
What about legal fees though?
This is everything. All end-to-end legal fees, a whole lot.
Okay.
Yeah, less than 10 grand. So it's not expensive really. So the company set up. Then what we did is we had the immigration specialists have the company, I don't know what the term is, but you basically get a number, which is a federal employer identification number, approved so that entity can sponsor people into the country. So like we have a 457 here, it's the equivalent over there.
Yeah, okay.
Now the Aussies are very lucky because there is a visa called an E3, which essentially is our professional sponsorship visa, and there are a lot more of those available than there are the H1s or H2 or the other ones that everyone else who tries to get into America uses. Okay. So we've got our own special visa, which is a godsend, and so what we did was Corporate Catapult, the entity that got incorporated there, then made an application. Basically, I walked into the consulate with a letter that said, this company would like to employ this guy because of his specialist skills to work for them. And we had to pay me a commercial rate, so that's something people need to think about. If you're going to be CEO in the Valley, then at that time the rate was 150k on the books for that guy, and then away we went. And so to make it easier, so it's not as intimidating for other people, I do not have a completed university degree. So I had a DNC because I went to Hewlett-Packard. I had my diploma in finance, and that's it. So you don't have to have a master's or anything like that. So the E3, in relative terms, was pretty easy to get.
Okay. So
incorporate the company, get an immigration lawyer to set it up so that it can sponsor people in, and then walk in with a letter to the consulate that says, there you go. And that immigration lawyer takes you through the whole process end to end. And as I say, you can get all this done for under 10 grand. And that gives you a 2-year visa, which is renewable, and it ties you to that company. The good news is if you're married, your spouse can come in and he or she can work anywhere they like.
Oh, really? Okay.
As your partner, which is a little ironic because as the primary person, you're stuck to that company, but they can work anywhere.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of, I guess, other resources that we haven't mentioned, and you've gone into a lot of detail about all the events and such. What other resources would you suggest that someone who's looking into this, looking to either do a recon or actually move over there? Yeah. What sort of things? What else would you suggest?
First thing they should do is they start doing the digital electronic recon that I talked about, and I made a note of a few sites and things that I use that most people will know of, but should just focus their efforts with so they can get a feel for the environment and best use their time when they're there. I use Quora.com, so for those who don't know, that's Quora.com, which is a Q&A site that was started by Facebookers that really focused on talent in the Valley first and then let it expand. Excuse me. And Quora is great because you can follow topics of interest for you and see who's talking about it, see who's respected and see who's rated on it. Now, some of those people you're going to meet when you're over there, and a great way to meet them is start interacting with them electronically, either on Quora or on their blogs if you find out that they've got blogs. So I would recommend Quora for you. I would say that you want to be looking at Mixergy. You want to subscribe to Startup Digest I talked about. You want to, if you're already an entrepreneur, you should get an account with The Funded. so thefunded.com, and that's only accessible by entrepreneurs. I think you probably have to have a URL already for them to approve you, because they don't want VCs or angels getting in there, because basically it's a discussion site for people who are seeking finance and are going through that process, and we all talk about VCs. So I met with ABC last week, here's what he said, I pitched him this, here was the feedback I got. If you're talking to John Smith, make sure you emphasize these things. That's really, really helpful for sort of like the insider's guide to getting funding. So I would recommend you do that. Venture hacks, just to educate yourself on the whole process. And then you should follow some prominent VCs and angels. So my favorites are Mark Suster, Brad Feld, Fred Wilson. That's a good starting point. So subscribe to their blogs. And then the other thing you should do is look up the co-working sites before you go there. So they're sprouting up everywhere. There's a bit of a bubble in them, apparently. The ones that I spent a bit of time at are Plug and Play in the Valley, Paris Soma, which is the French connection to South of Market, and Next Space is the other one. And the reason I say that is because when you can go there with the idea that you may or may not use their space. When you go and visit them, you get to meet all the entrepreneurs in their space, hear what's going on, see what it's like, make connections, swap cards, and that really gets you kickstarted when you arrive.
That was the interview. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any feedback or recommendations of people who I should be interviewing, please let me know. I do want to hear about it. Get in contact with me via the iPitch website. That's the best way. And otherwise, look out for more interviews at ipitch.com.au. Thank you.